The income equality crisis is at its highest. Did you know that the top 1% of American earners now hold more wealth than the entire middle class combined? It's true. According to recent federal data, over a quarter of all household wealth belongs to those in the top percentile by income. That's a staggering 38.7 trillion US dollars in wealth held by just 1% of the population. Meanwhile, the middle class, comprising 60% of households by income, holds just 26% of all wealth. And to make matters worse, low-income Americans, representing the bottom 20% by income, own a mere 3% of the wealth. It's a sobering reminder of the growing wealth inequality in our country. So, in this video, we'll talk about the income inequality crisis and its impact on the U.S. economy. However, before moving to the subject, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification. Ensure you're always aware of America's most important economic news. Now, let's get back to the topic. There is a significant debate among economists and policymakers about the extent of income inequality in the United States. While some researchers argue that inequality has risen sharply over the past few decades, others contend that it has remained relatively stable. Two groups of economists in particular have published influential studies with very different findings. On the one hand, Thomas Piketty, Emmanuel Saez, and Gabriel Zucman, known as PSZ, are among the most prominent proponents of the view that inequality has increased significantly. According to their research, the share of after-tax and transfer income going to the top 1% of taxpayers has risen from 9% in 1960 to 15% in 2019. This trend, they argue, reflects a combination of factors such as globalization, technological change, and changes in tax policy. On the other hand, Gerald Ottman and David Spintner, known as AS, have published studies that paint a very different picture of income inequality in America. Their analysis suggests that inequality has barely changed since the 1960s. In 2019, the top 1% of earners received 9% of after-tax income, up only slightly from 8% in 1960. This finding contradicts the narrative of rising inequality and has prompted debate among economists. Interestingly, both PSZ and AS use the same income concept, national income, and the same data, based on tax returns, to reach their conclusions. So, how can such different results arise from the same data? The answer lies in the different assumptions and methods used by the two teams. For example, PSZ focuses on pre-tax income, while AS looks at after-tax income. Additionally, PSZ includes capital gains and non-taxable transfers in their analysis, while AS excludes them. The debate over income inequality is not just a matter of academic interest. It has important implications for public policy as policymakers seek to address the challenges facing low and middle income households in the United States. Understanding the nature and causes of income inequality is therefore crucial for shaping policies that can promote greater economic opportunity and social mobility. The report below shows some interesting findings. It appears that from 1960 to 2019, the top 1% of wealthy people in the U.S. received a larger share of the national income after taxes and transfers. One study found that the increase was 6%, while another found only 1%. The difference between the two studies is due to how they measured the share of income before taxes. One study found that the top 1% share of income before taxes rose by 6%, while the other found an increase of only 4%. However, this difference in measurement only explains part of the gap between the two studies. The remaining difference is how taxes and transfer policies affect the income share. Both studies found similar results until the Tax Reform Act of 1986, which affected businesses in the U.S. Since then, the two studies have diverged in their estimates of the impact of taxes and transfers on income share. The newly released wage data from the Social Security Administration, SSA, provides an opportunity to examine the wage trends for the top 1% and other very high earners, as well as for the bottom 90% up until the year 2022. Data shows that the average earnings for all these groups experienced a decline in 2022, which could be attributed to the unusually high inflation rate. The inflation rate was recorded at 8.1% on a year-over-year basis, which is believed to be caused by supply chain bottlenecks, shifting demand during the pandemic, and energy price shocks stemming from the Russian invasion of Ukraine that began in February 2022. Despite the debate, according to recent data, it is irrefutable that in the third quarter of 2023, the top 10% of earners in the United States held a staggering 66.6% of total wealth. This figure is quite similar to the distribution of wealth in the second quarter of the same year. On the other hand, the wealth of the bottom 50% of earners has been slowly and steadily increasing since the beginning of the 2010s, although it still remains significantly lower than that of the top earners. While this data may appear concerning to some, it provides valuable insight into the ongoing economic disparities that exist in the country. Figure 1 shows the earnings inequality among men increased rapidly in the 1980s and 1990s after modest growth in the late 1970s. Interestingly, the pace of inequality growth slowed down after 2000. This trend is consistent with previous studies. Although capital income represents a small portion of total income, its distribution is much more uneven than labor income. When capital income is combined with labor income, the overall income inequality increases, reflected in the blue line. But how can income inequality affect the overall economy? Studies suggest that the income gap between rich and poor has been growing because the pay for most American workers hasn't kept up with the economy's growth. This gap has been slowing down the overall demand for goods and services by 2 to 4 percentage points of GDP annually in recent years. This matters because for many years the economy has been able to compensate for this slowdown through other means like low interest rates. But going forward, these solutions may no longer work, which means that income inequality could directly impact the economy's overall growth. Plus, since the U.S. is a vast country, geographical inequality also comes into play. It reached a new high in 2021. Take a look at this chart. In 2021, per capita average income was $69,000 in place at the 90th percentile of the income distribution, metropolitan New York, and $32,000 in place at the 10th percentile in Saginaw, Michigan, and Ashland, Ohio. Top of that, as it usually happens, geographic inequality increased more because the wealthiest places got richer than because poorer places fell further behind. Inflation-adjusted average per capita income in the median place increased by 70% from 1980 to 2021. If all places had similar income gains over this period, then income inequality would have stayed relatively constant. One of the ways income inequality hits the country the hardest is during economic hardships. According to the Federal Reserve's latest survey of consumer finances, American families experienced significant improvements in income and wealth between 2019 and 2022. This period was marked by the pandemic and the subsequent government spending aimed at mitigating its effects. As a result, households became less financially vulnerable during this time. However, while income gains were observed across the board, they were most pronounced among the highest earning families. In addition, the fastest income growth was seen among white families. On the other hand, the median income for Hispanic and Black families actually decreased slightly during this period. Overall, the survey highlights the unequal distribution of economic gains across different demographic groups. While the economy as a whole has shown signs of a recovery, there's still much work to be done to address systematic disparities and ensure that all households have access to financial security and opportunity. Also, income inequality is about the quality and longevity of an individual's life. Research has shown that there is a correlation between income and life expectancy. People with higher incomes are likely to live longer than those with lower incomes. However, the relationship is not linear and varies depending on the income level. Analysis of statistical data has revealed that a $10,000 increase in annual income has a more significant impact on the life expectancy of individuals with lower incomes than it does on those who are already financially well off. This means that the effect of income on life expectancy is more pronounced among people who live on a meager income as compared to those who are already better off. Finally, what's the outlook for 2024? According to the fresh Fitch report, the U.S. economy will slow down due to elevated rates and a contraction in bank credit, affecting consumer spending and private investment. As a result, GDP growth will weaken to 1.2%, down from 2.4% in 2023. Government's deficit will remain above 8% of GDP, and the country's already high debt burden will continue to rise, reaching almost 117% of GDP, with interest costs exceeding 3% of GDP in 2024. Thank you for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video and let us know what you think about this income inequality in America in the comments section below.